Selecting a nicotine pouch for beginners can feel overwhelming. There is a multitude of flavors, formats, and nicotine strengths to choose from. Having said that, how do you know which one to choose? One of the most important factors to consider when choosing a nicotine pouch is the nicotine strength. Nicotine pouches come in several different strengths, and different manufacturers tend to present the nicotine strength in different ways. Some manufacturers present the nicotine strength in the form of dots, in other words, a scale or grading system from 1 to 4, or 1 to 5. Others present the nicotine strength in milligrams per gram. For someone who doesn't have much experience with nicotine pouches, it can feel difficult to know which nicotine strength to choose. When discussing nicotine content, it is important to point out that nicotine content is not the only factor that affects your nicotine experience, although it is the easiest reference to look at. In addition to nicotine content, humidity and pH levels also play a role in how you experience nicotine. A more moist pouch tends to be perceived as stronger than a drier pouch because the more moist the pouch is, the faster and more efficiently it releases nicotine into the bloodstream. Furthermore, the format of the pouch also affects how long the nicotine has an effect. Low, 0.1 to 6 mg per gram nicotine content, 1 or 2 dots. Normal, 7 to 9.9 mg per gram nicotine content, 2 or 3 dots. Strong, 10 to 15 mg per gram nicotine content, 3 dots. Extra strong, 35 mg per gram nicotine content, 4 or 5 dots. If you are new to nicotine pouches, the nicotine content you should start with depends on several different factors. Generally, however, it is recommended that beginners start with nicotine pouches that have a lower nicotine content, which usually corresponds to standard or low. Nicotine is a chemical substance that humans develop a certain tolerance for, the more they use it. Having said that, more experienced users often choose a stronger pouch with more nicotine content to get the same nicotine kick that beginners get from nicotine pouches with lower nicotine content. With this in mind, the recommendation is usually that beginners start with the weakest pouches, often called low, which usually corresponds to 1 dot. If you feel that you want a higher nicotine content, you can then choose to use pouches with a higher nicotine content. However, it is not recommended that beginners start with the absolute strongest variants, because this often results in dizziness or even nausea. The time of day you use nicotine pouches also tends to affect the perceived nicotine effect. Mornings are usually the time when nicotine is felt the strongest and the most noticeable nicotine kick is experienced since you haven't consumed any nicotine overnight. The strength you should choose for the nicotine pouches depends on your overall experience with nicotine pouches. If you have never used nicotine products before, you should choose nicotine pouches with the lowest nicotine content, which is equivalent to 1 dot. On the other hand, if you have some experience with nicotine pouches, you can choose 1 or 2 dots. An experienced nicotine user can choose nicotine pouches with 2 or 3 dots, which corresponds to a nicotine content between standard and extra strong. For individuals who are not very familiar with nicotine pouches or other nicotine products, it is advisable to choose the lowest nicotine strength and then choose a stronger nicotine content based on this, depending on how you experience the strength.